It's Norma Ritz Johnson, Executive Vice President of the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce. Y'all are involved in something very serious.
Yeah.
A lawsuit. Y'all filed a lawsuit, and this is challenging new overtime regulations that probably a lot of maybe small business owners, even big business owners, may not know fully what's about to happen come December 1st, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of 5 federal lawsuits that we're involved in fighting overregulation. We're currently involved in lawsuits fighting a couple of EPA regulations and some DOL regulations. And this is one of the DOL regulations that we have been fighting since a year ago or more when we issued comment on what they had originally proposed. This is a regulation that is going to result in many salaried professionals in places like Lubbock having to punch a clock, having to keep track of time, being faced with maybe not being allowed to look at their work email after hours. Because this is a technological world that we live in now, and it's not necessarily the old punching the clock deal when you get to work and work follows you.
Yeah.
And so this is a complicated regulation. It's going to change things for salaried professionals, and it's going to result in increased costs for employers, especially in places like Lubbock that have a lower cost of living.
Well, what do the new regulations say? How does it impact employers here in Lubbock?
Yeah, so the Federal Labor Standards Act is what is the piece of legislation that was passed in the 30s that governs the threshold, the salary threshold, as well as the duty definitions of what jobs are eligible for overtime and what jobs are exempt from overtime eligibility. So typically, it's kind of complicated, but it's really sort of been looked at as a white-collar exemption. And so when you go out into the workplace, basically, if you fit one of those definitions of administrative, executive, professional, managerial, those are what's called the white-collar exemptions. And so the current salary threshold, that's one test, is the duty definition. The other one is the salary threshold. The current salary threshold is around $23,600. So if you are a white-collar professional and you make less than $23,600 a year, you are eligible for overtime. So an employer pays you time and a half for anything beyond 40 hours. That threshold has increased 6 or 7 times since the law was passed in the 30s. It has never increased the way the Obama administration increased it in this latest step. Additionally, when the new rule was published by the DOL, they added a 3-year ratchet where it ratchets up automatically every 3 years with just 150 days notice to employers. That's not enough time for a lot of employers to reconfigure the way they deliver services to their customers. That's not a lot of time for employers to reconfigure the way they do business, really. And so that's why we're fighting the regulation.
Well, and this is not only the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce, but I know the state of Texas joined in with y'all.
Right. So 21 states have filed suit against the regulation. And then we are in a lawsuit with 40 local chambers of commerce in Texas. That represents a lot of Main Street businesses in Texas, as well as the U.S. Chamber, the National Federation of Independent Business, the Texas Association of Business, which is the state chamber. And then there's other groups that are going to be affected, like the National Retail Federation, the National Association, the National Automobile Dealers Association. So several organizations, about 55 plaintiffs, and then there's the lawsuit with the 21 states, because this is going to weigh on state and municipal governments as well.
What is the, I guess, the new threshold for if these plans keep moving forward and they're not stopped? What is the new threshold for overtime?
So on December 1st, and that's one thing we want small businesses and employers to know, that this regulation is in place on December 1st of this year. We're hoping to get some type of an injunction before then. We just think that we need more time. You know, there have been 7 updates over the years, and so we think that, you know, maybe there did need to be an update, but it needed to be a sensible, workable update, like the updates that we've previously had. So the new threshold is $47,476 per year. So if a salaried white-collar employee makes less than that, they will be eligible for overtime. They will have to start punching a clock. They will lose a lot of the flexibility that a lot of employers offer. You know, you have a high season, you have a low season. You know, you can knock off here, knock off there in terms of, it's a flexible workplace, which is the vogue these days, is to offer flexibility. Yeah. Telecommuting is another thing that's part of that flexibility. A lot of that is really endangered by this new regulation, because it will be a much more rigorous form of timekeeping and record keeping that the employee and the employer are going to be faced with.
You mentioned people who, take their work with them when they go home. Mm-hmm. And I think just about everyone does that, right? I mean, just about everyone checks their work email when they're at home. I mean, it's almost second nature now. That's just what you do. Would that be affected by the new regulations?
Well, that would count as work. Checking your email on your phone at home, if it's related to the business, would count as work. In a lot of workplaces, you can't work overtime without getting authorization.
Right.
So, are you going to get authorization from your employer before you check your phone in the evening? And what does this do? I know that not everybody shares this, but when I was a young professional entering the workplace, I wanted to make my mark. And I made my mark by working long hours and putting in the extra effort and working as long as it took to get the job done. Working with, supervisors and my boss, doing what it took to get the job done. That's how we made our mark. And I think that that's the type of work ethic that Lubbock folks tend to have.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be a whole new world and basically change the American workplace in places like Lubbock, where a $47,500 salary is not an unusual salary for a white-collar professional.
When looking at this lawsuit, and it's Lubbock Chamber, 40 other chambers in
Local
Texas.
Chambers, right.
And then you've got 21 states, including Texas, that have filed a lawsuit. How does everyone work together on this? What is, what's the legal department of the Lubbock Chamber doing versus everybody else? How do you guys all work together? How does that happen?
Well, I'm telling you, it is a collective effort. As you know, we're involved in a few other lawsuits, as I mentioned earlier, and it is. It takes a lot of our time to make sure that that our inputs are there, that we're able to pull together a good case to communicate the impact. But I think all chambers of commerce are typically, we know how to pull people together to get things done.
Yeah.
And so this especially, at no other time with all these regulations, it's almost like there's a new major federal regulation every week.
Yeah.
It's time for us to pull together, and we're glad that we have strength in numbers.
How many businesses are aware of the new overtime regulations? Or do you think there are, some small business owners out there who they don't know? I mean, when we heard that when we had the new Obamacare, regulations come into place, it was so confusing for so many small business owners that they were struggling getting everything in place, years afterwards. Is that kind of what we're seeing with this as well? We've
done our best to make business owners aware, but we know that, business owners are dealing with so many other regulations that they have to keep track of, like Obamacare.
Yeah.
And so this is one where there's different levels of awareness. We're pretty sure that just about all the business owners are aware that something has changed, but how to deal with those changes, what type of time record keeping to put in place, can we have a company Christmas party, and does that count? Those questions like that. And, can my employees check email after work or not?
Yeah.
Can they text and make phone calls? That's the type of thing that a lot of employers are trying to sort out right now. And I think they're in the process of trying to figure out how they're going to deal with this. We hope to get an injunction on it.
Yeah, that's goal number one, right?
Yeah, that's goal number one.
What's the timeline look like as far as Is there a goal to get the injunction by, obviously, before December 1st, or are you looking any time earlier than that?
We would very much like to get the injunction before December 1st. We were successful with the persuader rule, which is a whole other complicated regulation, in getting an injunction right before that law was supposed to take effect back July 1st. And so it was right down to the wire, but we got that done for employers nationwide, right here in Lubbock Federal Court, I might add. And so we're really hoping for something before December 1st, but we can't promise that that's necessarily going to be the case.
If small business owners or just business owners here in town have a question about this, how can they get in touch with you?
Please call the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce. We're not legal experts at the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce, but we can refer them to some law firms that are members of the chamber, and we can provide them with the resources that have been put out so far just on what the changes are and maybe some steps that can be taken and checklists that can help them through this process.
How's everything else going at the chamber?
Well, it's really good. We're getting ready for the session, for the legislative session beginning in January, and so working with our members to figure out what the priorities and positions are going to be. And we're just wrapped up a great barbecue, and have a couple of other events lined up through October. Chamber of Commerce Week in Texas, as proclaimed by the governor, is October 17th. And so we hope to highlight quite a lot about the chamber during that week. There's a lot of folks that have misconceptions about the chamber. You know, we're not the city. We're not government. We're not tax funded. We are Lubbock's job creators pulling together for efforts like this.
Norma Ritz Johnson, Executive Vice President, will visit with you, I'm sure, in the near future about this and also about the legislative issues and much more about the chamber.
Thank you, Chad.